AI infrastructure is becoming a product, not a collection of scripts. Xinference 3.0 adds production authentication and offline deployment. Dify opens a sandboxed agent builder. Claude Code and Phoenix redraw the line between automatic review and explicit observability. MCP Inspector closes a security gap. Ultralytics pushes more vision tasks onto Hailo, NVIDIA, and Hugging Face. Scale Diffusers training. A new frontier ranking shows 6 labs above 50, and the global governance statement puts agent boundaries in writing. Xinference version 3.0 turns an open-source model server into a more complete production control plane with authentication, audit tooling, offline deployment, and a new default web interface. The default frontend is now a Next.js application, and database-backed authentication is enabled by default. The interface adds API keys, user management, password controls, security settings, an audit center, refresh tokens, and per-model GPU memory visibility. The release also ships a production Docker Compose path, an offline private Python package profile, a pre-built package mirror, and a slim GPU image. On the model side, VLLM gains BCE embeddings, while Queen 3 family chat templates now enforce system message ordering. For teams hosting models privately, this shifts the evaluation from whether a model can launch to whether the service can be governed, patched, audited, and rebuilt without depending on the public internet. This is infrastructure, not a new foundation model, and the release offers no independent throughput claim. Version 3 also changes defaults, so existing deployments need a migration review before production rollout. Artificial analysis says the frontier is widening. 6 labs now have a model above 50 on its intelligence index, up from 2 in early June, with Kimi K3 entering 3rd. 4 frontier models launched within 8 days in the firm's count. Kimi K3 scored 57, behind Claude Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Sol, while reaching 1668 ELO on GDP Val AA version 2 and 53% on Automation Bench AA. Artificial analysis estimates 94 cents per index task, about half its estimate for Claude Opus 4.8. Kimi K3 used 21% fewer output tokens than K2.6 while gaining 13 index points, but its measured hallucination rate rose from 39 to 51%. That combination matters more than rank alone. Near-frontier capability is spreading across more vendors, cost per task is falling, and stronger aggregate scores still do not guarantee better factual reliability. Every number comes from artificial analysis's own harness, model settings, and pricing assumptions. It does not prove universal superiority, and the report says Kimi K3's weights were not yet available, despite Moonshot's stated plan to release them. Dify version 1.16 puts its new agent experience into open beta, combining a Linux sandbox, reusable skills, workflow integration, and a publishable web application. Builders can set a base prompt, upload skills and files, connect Dify tools and knowledge, and use a conversational helper to configure the sandbox, install packages, and create resources. Agents can also run as reusable or inline workflow nodes. The release enables agent back by default and adds agent backend and local sandbox services to Docker Compose. It also upgrades workflow as MCP to the 2025-0618 protocol with version negotiation and structured tool output. This gives Dify users a path from visual workflow design to shell-capable agents without leaving the same workspace, while keeping agents reusable across applications and automation flows. The feature is explicitly beta, and Dify warns operators to serve it only to trusted, non-malicious users. Upgrades add migrations, environment variables, and a production secret that must replace the development default. Claude Code and Phoenix are moving coding agent control in opposite but complementary directions. Less automatic review inside the agent, and easier observability setup around it. Claude Code version 2.1.215 no longer runs the verify and code review skills on its own. Users invoke them explicitly. Phoenix version 19.1 adds a PX setup, MCP command, and an MCP settings guide for registering Phoenix with coding agents. Anthropic's release note contains one behavioral change, manual invocation for both skills. Arise's release adds the command line registration path, a settings tab, and documentation organized around agent-assisted setup. The practical message is that verification and telemetry are becoming deliberate control plane choices. Teams can decide when review runs, then connect traces and evaluations through a repeatable setup path. Neither release proves higher code quality. Removing automatic invocation can surprise workflows that relied on it, while registering Phoenix still requires compatible clients, credentials, and an observability policy. MCP Inspector reaches version 1.0 as the final release of its classic codebase, closing security warnings before the project moves to a new inspector. The release guards its fetch proxy against requests to link local and cloud metadata addresses, updates dependencies for multiple disclosed vulnerabilities, and fixes task result handling plus resource refresh behavior. The maintainers call this the V1 implementation and say a web client, command line tool, and terminal interface with shared architecture will replace it alongside the upcoming MCP specification release. Inspectors sit directly between developers and unfamiliar MCP servers. Blocking metadata-network access reduces one obvious path from a debugging convenience into a credential exposure problem. Version 1.0 is a security baseline, not a guarantee that every server or transport is safe. The maintainers also say this branch will be deprecated when V2 ships. Ultralytics version 8.4.101 expands Hailo deployment across nearly the full YOLO task range, including pose-oriented boxes and classification. Beyond detection and segmentation, Hailo export and inference now cover YOLO 8 and YOLO 11 pose-oriented bounding boxes and classification plus YOLO 26 classification export. Classification softmax runs on the chip, while pose and box outputs return through the standard pipeline. Ultralytics validated the new paths on a Hailo 8L using Hailo RT 4.23 and DFC 3.33. The release rejects unsupported YOLO 26 pose, box, and segmentation paths before compilation. For edge developers, one deployment target can now serve more vision tasks without separate conversion code, making specialized accelerators easier to fit into a common training and inference workflow. This is broader compatibility, not a new YOLO model or a speed benchmark. Other Hailo targets still require separate validation, and deployment remains specific to the compiler and hardware stack. NVIDIA and Hugging Face have connected NeMo Automodel to Diffusers, giving image and video teams a distributed fine-tuning path that keeps standard Diffusers checkpoints. Builders can fine-tune compatible hub models without converting checkpoints or rewriting model code, choose full parameter training or low-rank adaptation, and switch among FCP2, Tensor, Expert, Context, and pipeline parallelism through configuration. The published recipes cover WAN 2.1 and 2.2, Flux 1 Dev, and Hengyuan Video. Completed checkpoints can return directly to the Diffusers ecosystem for inference and sharing. This lowers the integration cost of moving an open generative model from a single-node experiment to a multi-node training job, while preserving a familiar model format. Current support is limited to flow matching models. The performance figures are vendor measurements from one node with 8 H100 GPUs and 3 steady-state windows, so they are not a general scaling guarantee. A follow-up World Artificial Intelligence Conference statement goes beyond the earlier launch announcement. It says, an agreement was signed in Shanghai to establish the World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization and adds specific governance language for frontier models and agents. The statement describes the body as the first intergovernmental organization dedicated to AI, open to all countries, headquartered in Shanghai, and focused partly on helping Global South nations build innovation, deployment, and governance capacity. It calls for leading AI companies to place guardrails on frontier models where failures could affect finance, power, communications, and transportation. For agents, it asks for defined decision authority, behavioral limits, traceability, and risk notices. The important shift is from broad, responsible AI principles toward an institutional proposal and concrete control concepts for agent behavior, areas that increasingly cross vendors and national borders. The evidence is the conference statement published by China's Foreign Ministry. It does not provide the agreement text, founding member list, ratification process, budget, or enforcement powers, so the organization should not yet be treated as an operating global regulator. Model competition is broadening, but the bigger story is operational maturity. Private serving needs identity and audit. Agent platforms need sandboxes and explicit review. MCP tools need safer defaults. Edge vision and generative model training need cleaner deployment paths. Governance needs both institutions and enforceable details. The stack is becoming more capable, but the durable advantage is knowing where control lives and where evidence stops. Subscribe for the next evidence-led AI industry briefing.